For 3 months, I swept the floors of TechFlow Solutions while Jessica Martinez treated me like I was invisible. Every night, she'd walk past me with her designer heels clicking against the marble floor, sometimes deliberately stepping on the SEH area I'd just mopped. What she didn't know was that in exactly 72 hours, I would be announced as the new CEO of the entire company. My name is David Chen, and this is the story of how I discovered who my employees really were when they thought nobody important was watching. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as I pushed my janitors cart down the 8th floor hallway of TechFlow Solutions. It was nearly midnight, and the Austin skyline glittered through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Most employees had gone home hours ago, but the marketing department always had a few stragglers working late on campaigns. That's where I first encountered Jessica Martinez, though she never bothered to learn my name. I'd been working the night shift for exactly 87 days, carefully documenting everything I observed about company culture, employee behavior, and workplace dynamics. What started as a routine evaluation had become something much more personal. Every interaction, every overheard conversation, every moment when people thought they were unobserved had taught me more about my future company than any boardroom presentation ever could. Mr. Harrison, the outgoing CEO, had suggested this unconventional approach during our final mentoring session. He sat behind his mahogany desk, silver hair catching the afternoon light as he explained his reasoning. David, he had said, you can read all the reports you want, but you'll never truly understand this company until you see how people behave when they think no one important is watching. The janitor sees everything, hears everything, and people treat them like furniture. You'll learn more in 3 months of night shifts than 3 years of executive meetings. At first, I thought he was being overly dramatic. I had an MBA from Stanford, years of experience in corporate leadership, and a proven track record of turning struggling companies into profitable enterprises. How much could pushing a mop teach me that I didn't already know? The answer, as it turned out, was everything. My first week had been relatively uneventful. I learned the building layout, figured out the most efficient cleaning routes, and started observing the late-night workers who crossed my path. The security team was professional and courteous, treating me with the same respect they showed everyone else. Amy Rodriguez, the evening security guard, even took time to learn my cover name and always greeted me with a warm smile. The IT department. Employees who worked late shifts were polite, sometimes offering me coffee from their break room when they noticed I looked tired. Then I met Jessica Martinez. She worked in marketing, specializing in social media campaigns for our biggest clients. On paper, her performance reviews were stellar. She consistently met her targets, showed creativity in her approaches, and had received 2 promotions in the past 18 months. Her direct supervisor, Ryan Thompson, praised her dedication and teamwork in every quarterly evaluation. From an executive perspective, she appeared to be exactly the kind of employee we wanted to retain and promote.
All the reality I witnessed during
Those midnight encounters told a completely different story. The first incident happened during my second week. I was emptying trash bins in the marketing department when Jessica emerged from her office, talking loudly on her phone. She walked directly toward me, clearly seeing my cart and equipment blocking part of the hallway. Instead of saying, "Excuse me," or waiting for me to move aside, she shoved my cart with enough force to send cleaning supplies scattering across the floor. Without breaking stride or acknowledging what had happened, she continued her phone conversation, while stepping over the mess she had created. Spent the next 20 minutes picking up scattered paper towels, spray bottles, and trash that had spilled from overturned bins. Not once did she look back or offer any form of apology. At the time, I convinced myself it was an isolated incident. Perhaps she was stressed about a deadline or dealing with a personal emergency. Everyone has bad days, and I wasn't ready to judge her character based on a single interaction. The second incident occurred 3 weeks later. I was mopping the break room floor, having placed wet floor signs at both entrances to prevent accidents. Jessica entered through the main door, completely ignoring the warning signs. She walked directly across the freshly cleaned surface, her heels leaving distinct scuff marks and footprints in her wake. When she reached the coffee machine, she turned around and noticed the obvious trail she had left behind. Instead of apologizing or offering to help clean up, she looked directly at me and said, "You missed a spot." Her tone carried a mixture of amusement and disdain that made my stomach clench. She then proceeded to make her coffee while I remopped the entire floor, occasionally glancing over with what could only be described as smug satisfaction. That night, I went home to my downtown apartment and stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. The man looking back at me wore a gray janitor's uniform with Dave embroidered on the chest pocket. In 72 hours, I would be wearing designer suits and making decisions that affected hundreds of employees and millions of dollars in revenue. The contrast felt surreal, but the lesson was becoming clear. Jessica Martinez treated people differently based on their perceived status and power, showing respect only to those she believed could impact her career advancement. Over the following weeks, I began paying closer attention to her interactions with different levels of employees. When she spoke with Ryan Thompson, her direct supervisor, her demeanor transformed completely. She became charming, attentive, and almost deferential in her approach. Her voice took on a softer, more professional tone, and she maintained consistent eye contact while nodding enthusiastically at his suggestions. She laughed at his jokes, even the ones that weren't particularly funny, and frequently complimented his leadership style and decision-making abilities. The contrast with how she treated support staff was stark and disturbing. I watched her interactions with the daytime cleaning crew, food service workers, and maintenance personnel. Her behavior was consistently dismissive, often treating them as obstacles rather than human beings deserving of basic courtesy. She would stand impatiently while they worked, sometimes sighing loudly or making comments under her breath about how long simple tasks were taking. One particularly memorable incident involved Tom Wilson, maintenance supervisor who had worked at TechFlow Solutions for nearly 15 years. Tom was fixing a malfunctioning printer in the marketing department when Jessica approached with obvious irritation. The printer had been broken for 2 days, and she needed to print materials for an important presentation. Instead of explaining the urgency professionally, she launched into a tirade about incompetent maintenance staff and how their delays were affecting her productivity. Tom remained professional throughout her verbal assault, explaining that the replacement parts had been delayed by the supplier and apologizing for the inconvenience. His calm response seemed to infuriate her further. She escalated her complaints to include personal attacks on his competence and work ethic. I watched from the supply closet, where I was organizing cleaning materials, feeling my anger build with each insulting word she spoke. What struck me most was not just her cruelty, but the calculated nature of her behavior. She knew exactly how far she could push without crossing lines that might result in formal complaints. Her comments were designed to humiliate and belittle, but carefully crafted to avoid specific language that could be classified as harassment or discrimination. It was bullying disguised as professional frustration, and she had clearly perfected the technique through years of practice. The pattern extended beyond individual interactions to her general attitude toward anyone she perceived as beneath her organizational level. I observed her treatment of temporary workers, interns, and newer employees who hadn't yet established themselves within the company hierarchy. She created an atmosphere of intimidation and disrespect that affected entire departments, though. She was careful to maintain her facade of professionalism when supervisors or executives were present. During my 6th week undercover, I witnessed an interaction that crystallized everything I had been observing. Lisa Park, a talented software engineer from our IT department, had volunteered to help the marketing team troubleshoot some technical issues with their campaign management software. Lisa was brilliant at her job, respected by her peers, known for her willingness to collaborate across departments to solve complex problems. When Lisa arrived at the marketing department that evening, Jessica immediately began treating her with the same dismissive attitude she showed to support staff. Despite Lisa's technical expertise and the fact that she was doing marketing a favor by staying late to help, Jessica spoke to her in condescending tones and questioned every suggestion she made. She interrupted Lisa's explanations, dismissed her recommendations without consideration, made it clear that she viewed the technical support as an inconvenience rather than assistance. What made the situation even more frustrating was Lisa's response. Instead of defending herself or pushing back against Jessica's rudeness, she remained patient and professional, focusing entirely on solving the technical problems despite the hostile environment. She worked for over 2 hours to resolve issues that were affecting multiple campaigns, never once responding to Jessica's negativity with anything less than complete courtesy and competence. After Lisa finally fixed all the problems and left for the night, I heard Jessica on the phone with Ryan Thompson, complaining about how long the IT support had taken, and suggesting that Lisa wasn't qualified to handle marketing department requests. She painted herself as the victim of inadequate technical support, completely reversing the reality of what had actually occurred. Her ability to manipulate narratives and shift blame onto others was as impressive as it was disturbing. That incident marked a turning point in my evaluation. I realized that Jessica Martinez wasn't just rude or unprofessional, she was actively toxic to our workplace culture. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Her behavior created ripple effects that damaged morale, discouraged collaboration, and drove away talented employees who deserved better treatment. Every interaction with her left people feeling diminished and undervalued. While she continued to advance her career by presenting a completely false image to those who could influence her advancement, as my 3-month evaluation period neared its end, I began documenting specific incidents and gathering evidence of the cultural problems that Jessica represented. I spoke with other night shift workers, reviewed security footage when appropriate, and carefully noted patterns of behavior that affected multiple employees across different departments. What I discovered was that Jessica wasn't an isolated problem. She was part of a larger pattern of toxic behavior that was being rewarded rather than addressed. The realization that I would soon be responsible for fixing these cultural issues felt both daunting and energizing. In 72 hours, I would shed the janitor's uniform and take on the challenge of transforming TechFlow Solutions into the kind of workplace where Lisa Park's talents were celebrated and Tom Wilson's experience was respected. But first, I had to decide exactly how to handle Jessica Martinez and the systemic problems she represented. The final week of my undercover evaluation was when everything came to a head, setting the stage for confrontations that would change not just my perspective on leadership, but the entire culture of TechFlow Solutions. The moment that shattered my carefully maintained composure happened on a Tuesday night during my 11th week undercover. I had witnessed Jessica's cruelty countless times, but this incident crossed every line I had drawn in my mind about acceptable workplace behavior. Lisa Park was working late again, this time helping the marketing team recover data from a corrupted campaign file that could have cost the company a major client. She had been at her computer for nearly 4 hours, methodically rebuilding months of work that Jessica's team had lost due to their failure to follow basic backup procedures. Lisa never complained, never pointed fingers, never made Jessica's team feel incompetent for their mistake. She simply rolled up her sleeves and fixed the problem because that's the kind of person she was. I was cleaning the conference room adjacent to the marketing department when Jessica's voice rose above her normal speaking volume. She was on a video call with a client, and something had clearly gone wrong. Through the glass partition, I could see her face reddening as she gestured frantically at her computer screen. The client was obviously unhappy. Jessica was scrambling to explain why their campaign materials weren't ready for the morning presentation. When the call ended, Jessica slammed her laptop shut and stormed over to where Lisa was working. Without any preamble or attempt at civility, she began screaming at Lisa about how the recovery was taking too long and how her incompetence was going to cost Jessica her biggest client. The accusations were not only unfair but completely backwards. Lisa was working overtime to fix a problem that Jessica's negligence had created. Yet somehow she was being blamed for the entire crisis. What happened next will be burned into my memory forever. As Lisa tried to explain the technical complexities involved in data recovery, Jessica grabbed the external hard drive that contained Lisa's backup work and threw it across the room. The drive shattered against the wall, destroying hours of painstaking reconstruction work. Lisa stared at the broken pieces scattered across the floor, her face showing a mixture of shock and devastation that no employee should ever experience. Jessica wasn't finished. She continued her verbal assault, calling Lisa worthless and questioning how someone so stupid had ever been hired by a respectable company. She threatened to have Lisa fired for failing to meet her deadline, completely ignoring the fact that Lisa was volunteering her time to help a department that wasn't even her responsibility. The cruelty was breathtaking in its scope and intensity. I watched Lisa's shoulders begin to shake as tears formed in her eyes. This brilliant, generous, hardworking woman was being emotionally destroyed by someone who contributed a fraction of her value to our organization. Lisa gathered what remained of her dignity, quietly packed her belongings, and walked toward the elevator without saying a word. As the doors closed, I saw her finally break down. Her reflection in the polished steel showing the complete emotional devastation that Jessica had inflicted. Something inside me snapped at that moment, carefully constructed barriers between David Chen, the undercover observer, and David Chen, the future CEO, crumbled completely. I had spent nearly 3 months documenting toxic behavior, telling myself that I needed comprehensive evidence before taking action. But watching Lisa's spirit break under Jessica's assault made me realize that my passive observation had made me complicit in the abuse. I abandoned my cleaning cart right there in the hallway and followed Lisa to the elevator. She was leaning against the wall, trying to compose herself before heading to the parking garage. When she saw me approaching, she quickly wiped her eyes and attempted a smile that fooled no one. "We don't have to accept this," I wanted to tell her. "What just happened was completely unacceptable, and it's going to change." But I couldn't reveal my identity, not yet. Instead, I offered her the only comfort I could provide as Dave the janitor. I told her that I had witnessed what happened, that it wasn't her fault, and that some people reveal their true character when they think no one important is watching. Lisa nodded gratefully but didn't say much. She was probably worried about keeping her job, knowing that Jessica had threatened to have her fired. The injustice of it made my blood boil. Here was one of our most valuable employees, afraid for her career security because she had tried to help a colleague who responded with cruelty and abuse. After Lisa left, I returned to the marketing department to find Jessica already spinning the story for Ryan Thompson. She was explaining how the IT department had failed to provide adequate support. Lisa had been uncooperative and defensive when questioned about delays, and how the entire situation demonstrated a lack of accountability. In technical support services, she painted herself as the victim of systemic failures, completely erasing her own negligence and the abuse she had just inflicted. Ryan nodded along sympathetically, making notes about performance issues in the IT department and promising to discuss the situation with their management team. He praised Jessica for maintaining her professionalism under difficult circumstances and assured her that he would handle the personnel issues so she could focus on salvaging the client relationship. The complete inversion of reality was stunning to witness. That night I went home and made a decision that would change everything. I called Mr. Harrison and requested an emergency meeting to discuss moving up my official start date as CEO. The 3-month evaluation period had provided more than enough evidence about the cultural problems plaguing our organization, and I couldn't spend another day watching talented employees suffer while toxic behavior was rewarded. Mr. Harrison seemed surprised by my urgency, but agreed to meet the following morning. When I arrived at his office, I laid out everything I had observed during my time undercover: the systematic bullying, the manipulation of narratives, the creation of hostile work environments for anyone perceived as lacking organizational power. I explained how Jessica Martinez had become symbolic of deeper cultural problems that were driving away good people and protecting bad behavior. The decision was made to accelerate my transition and schedule an all-hands company meeting for the end of the week. Mr. Harrison would announce his retirement and introduce me as his successor, giving me the platform I needed to address the cultural issues I had discovered. More importantly, it would allow me to take immediate action regarding Jessica's behavior and implement systems to protect employees like Lisa from future abuse. The remaining days of that week felt like preparation for battle. I knew that revealing my true identity would shock many people. But I also knew that dramatic action was necessary to demonstrate that toxic behavior would no longer be tolerated. Jessica had created an environment where good people suffered, in silence, while bullies thrived through manipulation and intimidation. That environment was about to change permanently. As I prepared for the confrontation that would define my leadership style, I thought about Lisa Park working late into the night, trying to fix problems created by people who showed her nothing but disrespect. She deserved better, and I was finally in a position to make sure she got it. Friday morning arrived with the weight of anticipation hanging heavy in the air. The all-hands meeting was scheduled for 10 o'clock, and employees throughout TechFlow Solutions were buzzing with curiosity about Mr. Harrison's mysterious announcement. Most assumed it would be routine corporate updates, quarterly results, or perhaps news about upcoming projects. Nobody suspected that their night janitor was about to become their new CEO. I spent the early morning hours in Mr. Harrison's office, reviewing the presentation materials and finalizing the documentation I had compiled during my undercover evaluation. The evidence against Jessica was overwhelming, but I knew that handling her situation properly would set the tone for my entire leadership tenure. This wasn't just about one toxic employee. It was about establishing a new standard for workplace, a culture that would protect every person in our organization. Marcus Johnson from Human Resources joined us at 8:30 to discuss the implementation strategy. He had reviewed my reports with growing concern, particularly the incidents involving Lisa Park and Tom Wilson. Marcus confessed that the HR department had received informal complaints about Jessica's behavior, but nothing substantial enough to warrant disciplinary action. Employees were reluctant to file official reports against someone who was clearly favored by management and skilled at manipulating situations to her advantage. The conversation revealed another disturbing pattern. Several talented employees had left the company over the past year, citing cultural fit issues or seeking better opportunities elsewhere. When Marcus reviewed their exit interviews with fresh perspective, a troubling picture emerged. Many of the departing employees had worked in departments that regularly interacted with Jessica or similar toxic personalities who had learned to game the system. As employees began filing into the main auditorium, I positioned myself in the back corner where I could observe reactions without being noticed. The maintenance uniform I wore had become my invisibility cloak over the past months, allowing me to blend into the background while witnessing authentic behavior from everyone in the room. Jessica entered with her typical confidence, settling into a seat near the front where she could be easily seen by executives. She had dressed professionally in a navy blazer and had styled her hair perfectly, clearly hoping to make a positive impression during what she assumed would be a routine company meeting. Ryan Thompson sat beside her. I watched them whisper quietly about potential promotion opportunities that might be announced. Lisa Park entered quietly and took a seat toward the middle of the auditorium. She looked tired, and I could see the lingering effects of Tuesday night's incident in her posture and expression. She had continued working diligently throughout the week, never complaining or seeking sympathy for the treatment she had received. Her professionalism in the face of abuse highlighted exactly the kind of character our company needed to cultivate and protect. Amy Rodriguez from security gave me a friendly nod as she took her position near the main entrance. Tom Wilson sat with other maintenance staff in a section that clearly showed the unofficial hierarchy that had developed within our organization. The physical seating arrangements reflected the same power dynamics that Jessica exploited in her daily interactions. At exactly 10 o'clock, Mr. Harrison stepped up to the podium and began his remarks. He spoke eloquently about his 30-year career with the company, the growth he had witnessed, and his pride in the team that had been assembled. The audience listened respectfully, though I could sense their impatience to hear the real news behind this gathering. When Mr. Harrison began discussing his retirement plans, a murmur of surprise rippled through the auditorium. Several employees exchanged glances, clearly caught off guard by the announcement. Jessica leaned forward slightly, probably calculating how this change might affect her career trajectory and positioning herself for advancement opportunities. Then came the moment I had been preparing for throughout my entire undercover experience. Mr. Harrison introduced the new CEO who would be taking over leadership of TechFlow Solutions. emphasizing the unconventional evaluation process that had been conducted to ensure the right person was chosen for the role. He explained how the new leader had spent months observing company culture from a unique perspective, learning about employee dynamics and organizational challenges firsthand. As Mr. Harrison called my name and invited me to join him on stage, I began walking from the back of the auditorium toward the podium. The journey felt both eternal and instantaneous, each step carrying the weight of revelations that were about to unfold. I could feel eyes tracking my movement, confusion spreading through the audience. As they tried to understand why the night janitor was walking toward the executive platform, Jessica's face was the first to register complete shock as recognition dawned. Her confident posture crumbled as she realized that the person she had treated with such contempt for months was about to become her ultimate supervisor. The color drained from her face, and I watched her hands begin to tremble as the full implications of the situation became clear. Ryan Thompson's expression showed similar devastation as he processed the reality of what was happening.
All of
The complaints he had dismissed, all of the toxic behavior he had enabled, all of the good employees he had failed to protect suddenly took on new significance. His career prospects had just shifted dramatically, and he knew it. Throughout the auditorium, different employees were having vastly different reactions to the revelation. Lisa Park's face showed amazement and hope, as though she was beginning to understand that her treatment might actually change for the better. Tom Wilson sat up straighter, pride replacing the resignation that had characterized his recent interactions with management. When I reached the podium and Mr. Harrison handed me the microphone, the auditorium fell completely silent. Every person in that room was waiting to hear what the janitor-turned-CEO had learned during his months of secret observation, and I was finally ready to tell them. My first words as CEO echoed through the silent auditorium with deliberate calm. I thanked Mr. Harrison for the opportunity and expressed my genuine excitement about leading such a talented organization into its next chapter of growth. The opening remarks were standard corporate speech, designed to ease the shock while I prepared to address the real issues that had brought us to this moment. As I spoke about company values and workplace culture, I could see Jessica frantically whispering to Ryan Thompson. Her panic was visible from across the room, and I watched her pull out her phone to frantically scroll through what I assumed were her recent interactions and behaviors. The reality of her situation was clearly sinking in with devastating clarity. After establishing my vision for the company's future, I transitioned into the more challenging portion of my presentation. I explained that my unconventional evaluation period had revealed both tremendous strengths and concerning weaknesses within our organizational culture. The strengths, I emphasized, came from employees who treated everyone with respect regardless of their position or title. These were the people who would drive our success moving forward. I began highlighting specific examples of exceptional character I had witnessed during my time undercover. I spoke about Amy Rodriguez, whose professionalism and kindness had made every night shift more pleasant for everyone she encountered. I praised the IT department's collaborative spirit, particularly noting how they consistently went above and beyond to help other departments succeed, often staying late to solve problems that weren't technically their responsibility. When I mentioned Lisa Park by name, calling her an example of the technical excellence and generous spirit that represented the best of TechFlow Solutions, I saw her eyes widen in surprise and gratitude. The recognition was long overdue. I made sure everyone in the auditorium understood the value she brought to our organization. Tom Wilson received similar recognition for his 15 years of dedicated service and his professional handling of difficult situations. I spoke about how maintenance workers like Tom were the foundation that kept our entire operation running smoothly, and how their expertise and reliability deserved appreciation rather than dismissal. The positive examples served a dual purpose. They established my values as a leader while simultaneously creating context for the behavioral standards I expected from every employee. As I spoke about respect, collaboration, and treating colleagues as valued human beings, Jessica's face grew increasingly pale. Then I shifted to the concerning behaviors I had observed, carefully avoiding specific names while making the patterns unmistakably clear. I described incidents of employees treating support staff with contempt, creating hostile work environments for colleagues, and manipulating situations to avoid accountability for their actions. The examples were detailed enough that anyone who had witnessed Jessica's behavior would immediately understand the reference. I explained how toxic behavior created ripple effects throughout the organization, driving away talented people and damaging morale across entire departments. The cost wasn't just measured in hurt feelings, but in lost productivity, decreased innovation, and the departure of valuable employees who deserved better treatment. As I outlined new policies for workplace conduct and accountability measures for behavioral issues, Jessica suddenly stood up from her seat. Her movement was so abrupt that it drew attention from everyone around her, and the auditorium fell even more silent as all eyes turned in her direction. Jessica's voice cracked as she attempted to speak, but instead of words, she turned and rushed toward the exit. Her departure was anything but subtle, and the sound of her heels clicking rapidly against the floor echoed through the otherwise silent space. Ryan Thompson started to follow her, but seemed to think better of it, remaining in his seat with his head down. The dramatic exit created exactly the kind of scene I had hoped to avoid. But it also served as a powerful demonstration of accountability in action. Without naming names or making personal attacks, the presentation had clearly communicated that certain behaviors would no longer be tolerated. The consequences were immediate and visible. I continued my presentation without acknowledging the disruption, discussing plans for enhanced HR training, improved feedback systems, and regular culture assessments to ensure that every employee felt valued and respected. The policies I outlined were comprehensive, addressing everything from conflict resolution to promotion criteria that would reward character alongside performance metrics. When I opened the floor for questions, the first person to raise her hand was Lisa Park. Her voice was steady, but emotional as she thanked me for the recognition and asked about opportunities for cross-departmental collaboration. Her question demonstrated exactly the kind of forward-thinking, solution-oriented mindset that I wanted to cultivate throughout the organization. Several other employees asked thoughtful questions about the cultural changes and how they could contribute to creating a more positive workplace environment. The engagement was encouraging, suggesting that most of our team was eager to embrace the new standards and work together more effectively. As the meeting concluded, I noticed employees approaching Lisa, Tom, and Amy to congratulate them on the recognition they had received. The interaction suggested that my message about valuing character and treating everyone with respect had resonated with the majority of our workforce. But even as I felt optimistic about the cultural transformation ahead, I knew that Jessica's abrupt departure was likely just the beginning of a more complicated situation that would test my leadership in ways I hadn't yet anticipated. The following Monday morning brought an unexpected twist that I hadn't anticipated. Jessica Martinez requested a meeting through Marcus Johnson, claiming she had important information about workplace harassment that required immediate executive attention. Her boldness surprised me, but I agreed to hear what she had to say. She entered my office wearing her most professional attire, carrying a folder thick with documentation. Her demeanor was completely different from the arrogant person I had observed during my undercover months. She spoke softly, almost meekly, as she began her carefully rehearsed presentation. Jessica claimed that she had been documenting a pattern of harassment and discrimination by maintenance staff and security personnel, who she alleged had been making inappropriate comments and creating uncomfortable situations for female employees. She presented what appeared to be detailed logs of incidents, witness statements, and even some audio recordings on her phone. As she spoke, I realized she was attempting to flip the narrative completely. In her version of events, she had been the victim of a hostile work environment created by the very people I had praised during the company meeting. She painted herself as a whistleblower who had been afraid to come forward because she feared retaliation from powerful maintenance unions and security contractors. The sophistication of her manipulation was breathtaking. She had spent the weekend creating an elaborate false narrative designed to discredit her accusers while positioning herself as a brave advocate for workplace safety. She even had tears in her eyes as she described the alleged trauma she had endured while trying to protect other vulnerable employees. But Jessica had made one crucial miscalculation. She didn't know that I possessed security footage from my months undercover, documentation of her actual behavior, and witness testimonies from multiple departments. More importantly, she didn't realize that her alleged victims were people whose character I had observed firsthand. I listened to her entire presentation without interrupting, allowing her to fully commit to her fabricated story. When she finished, I quietly opened my desk drawer and retrieved the comprehensive file I had prepared documenting her actual behavior patterns. I placed photographs, witness statements, and security footage, timestamps, on the desk between us. Jessica's face went through a remarkable transformation as she recognized images of herself destroying Lisa's work, berating Tom Wilson, and treating various employees with contempt. The carefully constructed facade crumbled as she realized that her manipulation attempt had not only failed, but it actually made her situation infinitely worse. I explained that her termination was effective, immediately, not just for the documented harassment and toxic behavior, but for the attempted fraud she had just committed in my office. The elaborate false accusations against innocent employees demonstrated a level of malicious intent that went beyond simple workplace misconduct. As security escorted Jessica from the building, I reflected on how her final manipulation attempt had actually validated every decision I had made during my undercover evaluation. She had shown me exactly who she was when she thought nobody important was watching, and her desperation had revealed even deeper character flaws. 3 months later, TechFlow Solutions had transformed into the collaborative, respectful workplace I had envisioned. Lisa Park had been promoted to lead a new cross-departmental innovation team. Tom Wilson had been recognized as Employee of the Month, and Amy Rodriguez had been selected for management training. The cultural changes weren't just cosmetic. Productivity increased, employee satisfaction surveys showed dramatic improvement, and we retained several talented people who had been considering leaving. The lesson was clear. When you treat people with dignity regardless of their position, everyone benefits. Ryan Thompson, after extensive coaching and probation, had genuinely changed his management style and become an advocate for inclusive leadership practices. Sometimes people can grow when given proper guidance and accountability. My undercover experience taught me that true leadership isn't about the title you hold, but about how you treat people when you think nobody important is watching. The janitor's uniform had been the best education in executive leadership I could have received. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. This one hit the mark. You won't want to pass these up. Let's click and check them out.